All right, everyone, we have Trevor Klump from Detroit Mercy in downtown Detroit with us at the moment. He is the Assistant Director of Strength and Conditioning there and has been for a number of years. Thankful to call him a good friend of mine as well, having spent some time with him in Michigan before my move out to Milwaukee. But stoked to have him on today, and he's going to tell us a little bit about what's going on at Detroit. But before he does that, I just want to get to know Trevor Klump a bit more. So go ahead, Trevor, introduce yourself, please, and tell us a little bit about some of your developmental opportunities and how you've grown in the field so far.
Sure. So yeah, like Stu said, he and I actually got together at U of M several years ago during our internship. And from there, that was my first internship. It was a completion, for my undergrad, which I got at Grand Valley State. Ended up into a graduate assistant role there at U of M with that same staff on the Olympic side. Was working with track and field and men's gymnastics at the time. From that point, I actually did step into the role, maybe not this exact role, but I was fortunate enough to make some contacts here at Detroit Mercy, and this has been my first full-time position. So unique scenario where I didn't have several internships before I was able to find that first internship, stayed on with that GA, and then found my first gig maybe, I think it was 2 months after I finished up with my graduate assistantship with Michigan, that I got the role as an assistant strength coach here. I was promoted, I think 3 years ago, as an assistant director. And right now I'm in charge of women's basketball, men's and women's soccer, and then the throws group. And because we are a smaller staff, we're helping everyone at any point. So got my hands in with, our men's lacrosse team, men's basketball, obviously basketball being our primary, sports. We don't have football, we don't have baseball. So basketball is kind of our bread and butter, and where we put a lot of our focus as far as, where we need to help out. So.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I think in terms of developing coaches, everyone's journey is a little bit different, isn't it? I actually was speaking with Coach Emily Schilling from Illinois just last week, and she had moved to 10 different states over 9 years or something like that, or 10 different locations. So pretty crazy. It seems like, you've obviously stayed reasonably close to home in Michigan, which is like great in terms of being able to be close to friends and family and develop that local network, really, really strong network, which is awesome. So in terms of intern coaches, if they were to come to Detroit Mercy, can you give us an idea of what the typical schedule is for them? Is it a Monday through Friday kind of setup? How many hours are expected of them? And also, like, what are some of the responsibilities that they might have with you?
Sure. So as far as a really basic schedule, we do most of our training Monday through Friday. There's occasional the weekend thing, as far as whether it's a practice thing or just a scheduling conflict during the week. So mostly Monday through Friday. With our class schedule, actually kind of dictates most of our training schedule, because we're a smaller institution. There's not the number of class options. So a lot of times that will weigh down and kind of tie us down to sticking to very early mornings. So most of the time we're in as coaches around 5:30. First team starts at 6, and we're pretty heavy through the morning until about 10 or 11. And then generally we have 1 or 2 afternoon groups. So fortunate in that sense that we are able to make things work and kind of condense the day. So most days we are wrapping up with our last team around 3 o'clock. And then there's the occasional, I would say, helping with practice or warm-ups, or there's the 1 or 2 days a week that we'll have a later team. But most of the time we're 6 to 3, which again is a nice aspect of it. As far as internship, or the interns and kind of what we expect, it's we're looking for at least 20 hours a week. 30 hours a week would be great, as much time as you can spend. I think one of the things that helps you continue to grow as an intern, especially if you're somebody that's new at it, is just time. If you need to put in the time to understand, how the athletes work, and what, where you need to be on the floor, and all those kinds of things, again, which we talk about a little bit, which we'll talk about as far as curriculum goes, but just put in the time. So as much time as we can, afford. We understand that interns, whether they're coming from a class requirement standpoint, we know you've got some classes that you got to take care of. And at the same time, we understand we're unable to pay. So if there's a way that we can, help you out as far as finding a part-time job that may cut into some of those hours, we try and be as flexible as we can, because we understand that it's not always, easy to work for free for months and months and months and years on end sometimes. So we have been working out some partnerships, and we do have a couple things in line to with some local contacts as far as getting some side side training with a couple of places. So certainly a benefit, and I think it's something that we're looking forward to trying to do more often with a couple of local training facilities. So
that's awesome. No, that's great. It's great to hear you helping them out and trying to meet them where they're at. Kind of, I think it's a bit of it's a dynamic balance, isn't it? Because just like you said, you have to put in the time. You have to get the time under your belt to truly understand like all nuances of what it means to be a strength conditioning coach in our setting, right, in the collegiate setting, but also private, pro, tactical, whatever it might be.
Sure.
But that's that balance of, for me at least, when I have our intern coaches here, we have a wide variety, like some that are just in for 8 hours per week because they're doing their undergraduate studies, some that are here for dedicated 40 hours or whatever. But at the same time, you want to have intern coaches that when they come to you, they are like dialed in, they're switched on, they're ready to rock. And if you have ones that are here for 40 plus hours per week, then maybe things get a little bit stale for them. So it's kind of that interesting interplay, but it sounds like, you have that flexibility, which is refreshing to hear, to make sure you put them in the best spot possible, which is really, really cool. So moving on then, obviously, it sounds like you mentioned your training operates around class schedules, and quite often as internship coordinators, we have undergraduate students often from our school that we work at or from neighboring schools in the community coming to us. And so just like you mentioned, that kind of flexibility is important. They're obviously learning in their class about the practices of strength conditioning and the theory behind it. But sometimes we find that information is either slightly outdated or it's not truly applicable when it comes to like the practical setting of collegiate strength conditioning and, the person you have in front of you, the group you have in front of you. So can you tell us a little bit about your coach development program in terms of the curriculum, maybe a couple of topics that you deliver and how that might help them actually apply the knowledge that they might be learning in the classroom?
Sure. And I think really what it comes down to is for us is what do our interns want to learn? So we've got a booklet, a 50-page internship curriculum that has a lot of the basic information. And that's really where we stick with it, because I think at least where we're coming from, my boss and I are, not that our philosophies are much different, but we have different ideas on how we train our teams. And it works because we can play off of each other. So what we want to try and bring is that, kind of like you said, was I'm a little more by the book. He's a little more, old school is not the right word to use, but it's that, hey, it's that tough and rough. We need to put a lot of work in, and it's just, not that it's wrong. He gets it done. His teams have been successful with it. And he produces well. So the kind of that balance that we're seeing, I think is kind of unique to us, and that's what we want to try and show these interns, is that although the book says here, it's not always going to be the case, and it's never that cut and dry. There's always that gray that we have to work with. So I think seeing some of that balance where I lean and I kind of skew towards what that book says, and he's like, no, he's been in it for 20, 25 years now. He understands that it just doesn't work sometimes. So outside of kind of seeing that, our internship is relatively simple as far as, what we're trying to teach. We want to try and talk about good exercise. Our first thing, I guess, is getting into, exercise technique. Hey, here's how we look at a squat. Here's how we look at our bench. Here's how we look at power cleans. Let's make sure that we can dial that in, because I think that's our first opportunity for our interns to interact with the athletes is, hey, let's make sure that we follow along with these 3 or 4 principles. Make sure you can identify those as far as, what are their feet doing? What's their trunk and their core doing during these certain exercises? Can we find links between those things? That way we can teach, the whole spectrum of these exercises using a handful of cues, if that makes sense. So outside of that, a little bit of programming. We've tried to, at least with our last intern group, we've tried to, help them develop a semester long plan, much like we did back in at Michigan, and in developing something that is long term, because I think there, at least in my experience with the interns that we've had, not to say that this is generalized across the board, but they see it as, hey, it's just a workout. But how does that workout fit into their larger scope of their yearly plan, So, or their overall development. We still have these kids for 4 to 5 years. How does it look when they start as a freshman? Yes, we need them to be good, and we'd hope that they're getting stronger right away, but realizing that we have this bigger plan for them over the course of their 4 or 5 years with us. So, but outside of that, we touch on conditioning, and I think that was one of the things that I felt we missed from an internship, even from a graduate assistantship position, because when I was doing my GA and our internship, we didn't really have a whole lot of hand in programming, conditioning, and those kinds of things, especially with the teams that I worked with. So we try and touch on that a little bit more. And then obviously utilizing the technology that we have, being able to get in and get their hands dirty with Team Builder and utilizing that. I think that's going to be a huge thing. I don't know of many schools that don't have some form of Team Builder or don't use some sort of technology anymore. So we were able to show them with First Beat in our basketball programs how to read some of that information. We've got some great contacts in the field that we can bounce ideas off of, and we want to bring those conversations or the interns into those conversations with us. So and then a new one this year, we're using Titan Sports, the GPS, with our soccer team. So being involved in interpreting some of that data, that way they can take at least they can say that they've got some experience with that, whether that's just a little bit, or if they dive into it in something that they're seeing. So I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, there's a lot of gold in there, and I want to touch on quite a few things, but one of them in particular, you talk about the personality of your coaching staff, and we'll get to that in a second here, but I have similar shared experiences with you about that, so that'll be interesting to discuss in a second here. Certainly, I like what you talked about with the technologies and the different softwares that you're exposing these coaches to. We're in this like technological revolution in the weight room. We're no longer just the person who prescribes the programming and delivers the coaching cues for the exercises. We now have to be, in some respects, data scientists, very, very novice data scientists, but data scientists nonetheless, and sports scientists in a way. And so I think setting up your intern coaches for success to take that next step and to have a great application portfolio to say, I've used programming softwares, I've used GPS monitoring systems, I understand the pros and cons of them, the assumptions or the misconceptions that people have about them, and how to put it into, like you said, that broader picture and actually make it applicable. So that's really important. So moving on from there, I think we're trying to set up these intern coaches to move on, just like we said. So could you maybe tell us about a particular intern coach that you've had in the past there at Detroit who was really successful? They've moved on to a new role, and maybe talk about what they were like when they were with you, and maybe like where they are now and what they're doing.
Sure. So it actually works out really nice, and he's come a long way, because we hired him as a full-time assistant here just a couple months ago. His name's Eric Davis. Came to us a couple of years ago from a recommendation from Eastern Michigan, and came in with a good amount of coaching, because he had been coaching like high school football and from the sport coach side of things. So he had a good base in coaching and how to interact with athletes, and was able to get on that level. But it was the strength and conditioning that not that he was green, but he was still learning about. So did a really good job as far as just wanting to be that sponge. I know we use that analogy, just wanting all the information, constantly asking questions. And it came down to, really, we saw just an eagerness. He loved doing what he does. Even to this day, he is still, he walks in like a kid in a candy shop as soon as he steps on the floor. His personality, I think, dictates, a lot of what his success was. He's happy to do the grunt work. He's happy to do, to scrub the floors and do the cleaning that unfortunately happens with internships. And he took those kinds of things. He took, on himself and was, it just showed us that, like, I'm ready to do this and I want to do this. I'm going to do whatever I have to make this work. So he impressed us enough, showed us that he was willing to learn, asked questions all the time, got to a point where we were like, all right, you need to calm down. So, but it was just, it just had that drive that he knew this is exactly what he wanted to do. And he was willing to learn from whoever and however he had to, and it was, oh, who's that coach? I need to look him up. So it was, if we were talking about somebody in the field and he was getting on, Googling who this was and finding Instagram posts, finding, articles and things like that, that day, that same hour. So it put us in a really easy position to say, hey, we've got this graduate assistantship, let's step into that role. So hired him on as a graduate assistantship just after, I want to say he was there for a full semester. And again, was able to take on a few more teams, and it just knocks out of the park, honestly. And I think what it really came down to is that he's one of those, I don't need the recognition. I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to work really, really hard. And that really was kind of how we saw, and we knew that he would be a good fit with us. And it certainly didn't help or didn't hurt that he was just a good dude. He's just, you can sit down and you can have just a normal conversation about anything. So he was willing to just be himself and willing to learn, I guess. I can't say enough good things about Eric, honestly. So I would say he's our success story. I mean, given that we were able to bring him in as a full-time coach here just a couple of months ago, just, I think it goes to show, if you buy into, again, back to what we were talking about, what I talk about, and then what my boss Nick talks about, and his ability to balance those things, put him in a really good spot to continue to move on.
Yeah, no, that's great. It sounds like he's making a big impact already. Even being, a younger coach in the field, and that's exactly what we look for. And I tell our intern coaches all the time, hey, listen, people hire good people, right? And people hire people they like. And so it's about, first and foremost, establishing those relationships and then showing that just like Eric is, he's not looking for the recognition. He's just looking to develop and grow, and has that kind of relentless pursuit for knowledge, which is really, really cool. So you've obviously touched on like quite a few different personalities that you have in your department, and Eric and your boss, yourself. And like I said, I have those shared experiences too. And one thing that you said that stuck with me is like, your boss has been in the field for much longer than you. And he kind of has that way of understanding the room and delivering things that you might be like, I'm not sure I would have done it that way, but it works. It works for how you deliver your session. Same with my boss, in terms of, I've head in the clouds with the numbers, looking at VBT stuff. I'm like, Coach Todd, check this out. Numbers are going up through the roof. It's like, great. Doesn't matter. His form's terrible. Sort it out. So it's it's kind of like you eat your own words. Like, oh yeah, that's true. So no, it's really, really cool to hear that. So in terms of the personalities you have in your department, if there was a young coach who thought, I really want to go to Detroit Mercy to learn under their staff, what kind of personality of an intern coach would be the kind of quote unquote ideal candidate to come to you guys? How would they mesh with you?
I think you kind of touched on it. It's somebody that you just, can we get along with you for 8 or 10 or 12 hours a day? It's having a thick enough skin to handle sarcasm, to handle honest truth talks. It's the sideline banter that we have, can be, it's turned, and I'm not trying to think, I don't want to say this is it's a negative, but we're good buddies. We're friends, so how do friends, every once in a while, rag on each other, are you able to handle that in a way that again, can you work with us for 8 or 10 hours a day and still be okay and like, hey, let's go grab a beer afterwards, and not want to just, I need to get away from this guy. So I think just being open, having a good sense of humor, being willing to learn. But again, back to your point, just, people hire good people. And if you find that you mesh well with somebody, stick with them, because I can tell you how many jobs Um, I I've seen people get because of their ability to just work well with people and be a good dude. Not to say that they're not good coaches. I'm sure they are, or they are. I know that, but I know several people that have continue to move on up just because they're good people, and they've got the foundational strength and conditioning background, to back it up. But just good people.
Absolutely. No, I can't tell you the number of times that I've heard established coaches in the field talk about hiring an individual and saying, yes, they had the prerequisites that we're looking for. They were outstanding potentially in one specific area. They had that kind of content level expertise,
Mm-hmm.
but we hired them because they were humorous. They had personality about them. I could see myself working with that individual, like you say, for 12 hours a day and
Right.
thinking, can't wait to see you again tomorrow,
Exactly.
So yeah, that's really cool to hear. I think a lot of young coaches kind of get caught up in the, I need to have a really professional outward facing appearance. And I think that is important in some situations, but you also need to let your true colors show through, because on the flip side of that coin, you don't want to get to an internship whereby you're one person and the whole staff is another kind of person, and you're there for 4 or 5 months thinking, I'm not in this community type of thing.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think it's really important that the people come into this website with Momentum Connect understand the person who's going to be on the other side of the internship and gets to know them a bit more. So that's awesome. Well, hey, Trevor Klump from Detroit Mercy, super appreciate your time and kind of giving back to the field and hopefully pushing these things forward so we can help to serve our young coaching community and help them make better decisions about their future. So appreciate your time. Everyone, if you want to learn more about the awesome program that Trevor and his staff run, obviously look at all the information on the page below with the application material at the bottom of the page, and get applying. So appreciate your time, Coach, and we'll
Thank
speak to
you
you
again. Thanks.